Before I start out my video, I want to give a shout out to this YouTube channel. So they give out free Disney Plus accounts, and all you need to do is subscribe and DM their Instagram account if you have Instagram, and they will give you a free account. Alright, that's all. Back to the video. Hey guys, and welcome to part 2 of me ranting about newer Nickelodeon shows. So since my last video on Danger Force did well views wise, but not well comments wise, I would just like to say thank you for the views though. Thank you very much. That motivated me to make a part 2. And I just like to say, I watched the first half. That was enough torture, so I definitely won't be watching the last half, even though Henry's gonna guest star in the next episode. So today I am gonna be talking about mainly young Dylan, but squeezing some time to talk about group chat in the end. So without further ado, let me just get into the video. So Young Dylan was a show created by Tyler Perry, and it premiered on February 29th of this year, following one of the final episodes of Henry Danger. So the summary of this show is supposed to be: young Dylan's grandmother decides to send him to live indefinitely with her son's family. The Wilson family household is soon turned upside down as lifestyles clash between aspiring hip-hop star and his straight-laced cousins. So with that summary, let's get into the pilot. So the episode starts off with Charlie and his sister Rebecca having a fight, but then they are interrupted when their grandmother comes. So Charlie has this thing where he has an imaginary friend, and he asks his parents if he can invite his imaginary friend over to dinner. And eventually, Rebecca notices somebody at their dinner table. So she thinks she's just hallucinating, but no, there really is a kid there. And her parents think that she's crazy by her telling them that, oh, there's a kid there. But then the kid turns out to be their cousin Dylan that their grandmother adopted because his actual mom did not want him. And so the parents of Charlie and Rebecca, Yasmin and Miles, they are reluctant because I guess they haven't met this kid before. I was expecting that if Dylan is supposed to be their nephew, wouldn't they have at least known he existed, or wouldn't he have at least came to visit? That was very weird. So they already start off doing too much with the pilot episode. So Dylan is this kid that comes from the streets, Chicago, and mind you, this kid is only 8, and he's talking about loosening Charlie up. Since this show takes place in the suburbs, he's talking about, okay, I'm gonna get you talking that street slang. There's nothing wrong with being a suburban kid, but coming from an 8-year-old, I'm just like, boy, sit down. What do you know about the streets? You are only 8. So then Dylan goes off rambling about he's gonna loosen Charlie up, and he starts talking about where babies come from. And he just met this kid, and he's talking about where babies come from, and then he ends up being like, French kissing. And I'm just sitting at the TV like, how is an 8-year-old knowing about French kissing? It was very weird to me. So the episode ends off with Miles and Yasmin accepting that, okay, this is their new life, and they welcome Dylan into the family. Now, as the show goes on, it has pretty decent plot lines, but one of the problems I have with the show is the laugh track. The laugh track, every single line of the show, you hear 5 seconds of laugh track, and the lines aren't even funny. Like, there's some lines in the show that are intended for you to laugh, but you're just staring at the TV screen. That's basically a whole episode of the show in a nutshell. So let me give a brief summary of the characters. So Dylan is this kid that comes from Chicago and is an aspiring rapper. That's basically his whole personality. He turns out to just be an annoying kid, but because he can rap, I guess they give him some credit for that. But Dylan's main persona is because he's from the streets, that he doesn't have any kind of manners. He thinks he's too cool for school. When the reality is, like Miles said, a lot of rappers went to school. You don't need to drop out of school to become a rapper. But yeah, that's basically Dylan's whole persona. They end up doing, like, you know how they have the older sister and they have the little brother that has a crush on their best friend. They basically did that with Dylan and Rebecca's friend Bethany. And speaking of Rebecca, Rebecca is the oldest out of the three. She's 12 years old, and basically she's like that sassy black girl. I wish she wasn't like that, but that's how Tyler Perry wrote her to be, and he's basically like, okay, this is your representation. Take it or leave it. Then let me do a brief summary on Charlie. Okay. Charlie is around the same age with Dylan. The only difference between him and Dylan was that he grew up in the suburbs and Dylan grew up in Chicago, and he's the one that talks about having imaginary friends, but he ends up basically becoming a Dylan 2.0. Like, you really couldn't have. The thing is, like, I get him hanging out with Charlie, but basically Charlie, ever since Dylan came to the house, him and Charlie are basically the same character. Same character, just grew up differently. Alright. Miles is the father of the group, and I don't like how they made it seem like these older generation of people, they know what rap is, but anytime they bring up any new slang, they start acting like a Dumbo, like they aren't even speaking English, which they are. But that was something I didn't like, how they treated like regular slang nowadays, or AAVE, or as they call it, Stan, Twitter language, as if it was different English. You should know what is English and isn't English. And they did the same thing with Yasmin, but eventually they do understand due to Dylan rapping all over the house. And basically, whenever Dylan would say something, one of the kids or even the grandmother had to break it down for Miles or Yasmin to understand. Whew. Then you have um Dylan's grandmother, Viola, which is basically kind of like the grown-up version of Rebecca. She's another sassy black woman. She's quick with her comebacks and very sarcastic. And then finally you have Bethany, Rebecca's best friend. That's it. And Rebecca's best friend that Dylan has a crush on. That's basically all we know about Bethany. And one thing this show reminded me of was it kind of reminded me of a knockoff version of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where this kid is sent off where a kid is sent off to go live with their distant family, and the one of the adults doesn't want them there, but they have to become used to it. Familiar? Sound familiar? Yeah. Yeah, I think it does. But one key to having a good show is you have to be able to like the main character. If you don't like the main character, you aren't going to have a good show. And that's basically how I feel about Dylan. Like, I think he's a good kid in general, but him trying so hard to have this street image when he's only about the age of a third grader, that just makes him very unlikable. Like, he's just really annoying in general, and I kind of wish they didn't do that one-sided crush thing with Bethany. It's like, And again, I just don't like the fact that he couldn't let Charlie be Charlie. He had to make sure that Charlie was just like him. Like, just no. No. And another thing is the chemistry feels very forced. I feel like the only ones that can act out of all of them was probably the dad, because he had previous acting experience. He was even on the hit show Martin back in the 90s. He played Martin, one of Martin's his best friends, and then also the grandmother. Other than that, none of these kids can act. I'm sorry, none of these kids can act. That's just it. Putting a laugh track in every single line of the show will not make it funny. It just won't. And this section is basically where I get into Tyler Perry. As I stated earlier, this show was created by Tyler Perry, which means it was wrote by Tyler Perry. Everything was directed by Tyler Perry. Everything. Tyler Perry, Tyler Perry, Tyler Perry. So early on in the year, Tyler Perry posted a video on Instagram. If I can find it, I'll play it. Talking about how he has no writers, and I think he posted about 8 or 9 scripts talking about, oh, he writes all his shows, he doesn't hire any writers. Look, I'm hustling. I wrote all these shows, and you can do that too. But the thing is, have you Googled this man? Tyler Perry is a billionaire. I don't know why I know he started off writing plays by himself, but once you get to a place where you can hire writers, why don't you? Just because you have a high quantity of shows that you've written, that does not make them good. It's the same thing of when you have an essay and you have somebody read it over for you to say, okay, this doesn't sound good, take it out and replace it with this. Tyler Perry doesn't do that. It's basically what I write, I right. It may not be good to y'all, but oh well. Don't watch it. Don't watch it. Like, he has all this resources. He even has a studio here in Atlanta. And one thing I found out was he doesn't even take his time on the shows. I think one of his movies that aired this year, he films these shows in 2 weeks to a month. So I just looked up the Wikia, and this show was filmed in a month and a half. This show came out at the end of February, and they only started production in January. A month. A month prior to premiering. That's when it just started filming. That makes a lot of sense. It really makes a lot of sense. He thinks that he can just take his core audience, which is the church-goer black woman, and he could turn that into a kids sitcom, and it just didn't work. It would work if he had other people's opinions. If you were writing about young kids, wouldn't it make sense to hire young black writers? He has this opportunity to kickstart young black writers' careers, but he doesn't. It would be a lot better if he allows others inputs, but no, it's me. Everything created by Tyler Perry, his name is on everything. What's the point of having a whole studio, creating your own table, if you don't even let anybody sit at it? It's ridiculous. Again, this show was filmed in 1 month. Quantity over quality. Quantity does not equal good quality. That's all I have to say, really. But yeah, those are my main complaints about the show. Like, it's too much laugh track. The acting is below average, and just the scripts aren't good. He needs more than just his voice to write a good show. And it all makes sense, because guess what this show is rated on IMDb? A whopping 3.1 out of 10. And so this last section of the video, I'm just going to be reading a few reviews. Alright, so this review says, after watching the first episode, it's obvious that Tyler Perry doesn't care about creating well-written content and threw something together. The show has horrible dialogue and chemistry. The actors try too hard to be funny, especially the actor who plays the character Dylan. He tries too hard to be urban, which causes his character to be annoying and unrealistic. So, this person said, my son likes some pretty mediocre Nickelodeon shows, but the show is unwatchable. Think Fresh Prince, but with weaker scripts. It is clear that many of the actors are acting, which is not a good sign. I blame the scripts, not an actor. On Wikipedia, they're calling this an African American comedy series. Where's the comedy at? Because I wasn't laughing. I mostly fell asleep. The dialogue is trash. The acting is atrocious. Dylan tries way too hard to be cool. Zori's acting is the worst. I hope he doesn't see this review. And the laugh tracks. The show is not funny. And I see what he's doing, but if you're hiring black actors to be in this trash, you really aren't any better than the white people hiring black actors to read trash scripts, Tyler Perry. And that's why I wish there were more black sitcoms. There used to be so many in the 90s and 2000s, and I'm so glad some of them are on Netflix, but that just isn't the case now, and that's pretty sad. So basically, let me get into Group Chat real quick. It is a show starring Annie LeBlanc and Jaden Bartels, and basically they invite a few celebrities over and they do some challenges over the Zoom call. And that's basically what the show is. It's just, I feel like it could just be a YouTube series, but they turned it into a whole TV show when it shouldn't have been. So it's basically a random show with celebrities. Just really isn't that entertaining in my opinion. It's way better than Young Dylan, which is sad. It's sad, but that's just how it is. They do have a show coming out next week called Side Hustle, so I'll check that out, and if I don't like it, you may see a review on it. But yeah, that's just my commentary on Young Dylan and Group Chat. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. If you didn't, oh well. I'll leave the link to the person that's giving out Disney Plus accounts in the description, as well as my last video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
You know this, but all shows on television have a writer's room, and most of the time there are 10 people, 12, whatever, that write on these television shows, right? Well, I have no writer's room. Nobody writes any of my work. I write it all. Why am I telling you this? I wrote all of these scripts by myself in 2019. What's my point? Work ethic.